Hey everyone, I'm Matt Dolan with Dolan Divorce Lawyers in Connecticut, and today I'm going to talk about whether or not you should move out of your house while a divorce is pending. Now, first off, there's no impact on your claim to equity of the house. It doesn't matter if you're still living in the house while the divorce is pending or if you've moved out. It's still a marital asset that is subject to division. So by moving out, there should not be any negative impact on your claim to the equity in the house. Now, there are a number of other things to consider in determining whether or not you should move out. One thing is the affordability of maintaining two households. Obviously, the divorce process can be expensive. You may be paying attorneys and incur other costs. So if you move out of the house, you then have a second household that you are paying expenses for. Now, obviously, ultimately, in a divorce, you're generally going to be moving to a two-household situation. So at some point, you're going to have to incur that extra expense of you and your spouse maintaining two households. But it just may not necessarily be affordable while the divorce is ongoing because you might have extra expenses that you won't have after the divorce is over. And you should also keep in mind the fact that just because you move out of the house does not mean you no longer have to contribute towards the expenses of the household. If you move out and you're the higher wage earner, or even if the two of you earn the same, or even if you earn less, depending on all of the expenses and your family dynamic of finances, your spouse could still file a motion with the court asking that you contribute to the expenses of the household, even if you move out. So it's not a situation of you move out and you no longer have to contribute towards the household. So that's one of the financial aspects that you need to consider in determining whether or not to move out. And you also want to consider whether or not you want to keep the house in the long run. So presumably whoever's keeping the house will buy out the other party to their claim for equity. So if you want to be the person who ultimately keeps the house and buys your spouse out by giving them some other asset or paying them X amount of dollars as a buyout of their equity, if you want to be the person to keep the house and you move out of the house, it's going to be more difficult for you to have the claim to the household. Because ultimately, if you go to trial and the judge is making a decision as to who should keep the household, they're more likely to let the person who is still in the household at the time of trial keep the house and allow them to buy out the other party or give the other party some asset. So if you want to keep the house, you should stay in the household. There's also custody implications. So if you move out of the household while there are no custody orders in place, there's really kind of a free-for-all for custody. If there's no orders in place, there's no schedule to follow. And obviously, if your children are living in the household, it's going to be difficult for you to compel the other party to allow you to have the kids half the time or every other weekend or whatever you want the custody arrangement to be. So all other things equal, it's probably best to wait to move out of the house until you have set custody orders in place. So you want to figure out that parenting plan before you move out of the house in many situations. And you may want to move out of the house because of the atmosphere in the house. So if things are very tense, there's a lot of conflict between you and your spouse, despite there being no parenting plan in place, you may need to just remove yourself from the situation and go live somewhere else just to protect your children. It might be a very tense situation that your kids are being negatively impacted by. So you might want to move out of the house just to protect your own children's well-being. And then you also may need to move out in order to protect yourself. So, if there is a high conflict divorce going on, by staying in the house, tempers may flare and you could expose yourself to the risk of your spouse, calling the police and leading to your arrest or filing a restraining order, and there being some other negative implication if there is a claim of abuse by your spouse. Now, on the flip side, if you're trying to settle your case and you want to get to a settlement, you may want to stay in the house in order to keep things a little bit more uncomfortable. Sometimes if two parties are living apart and they're already separated, your spouse may be more comfortable with that situation. And if they're more comfortable, they may be more likely to drag out the process and less incentivized to settle the case. Whereas if you're still having to live under the same roof and see one another every day, that may be uncomfortable, and that situation may compel somebody to be more reasonable and reach a settlement. And generally speaking, in these divorce cases, the quicker you can settle, the better. It will be less costly, and it will allow you to move on in your life and will be less emotionally taxing. So in that situation, you may want to stay in the house in order to get everybody to reach a settlement. So really, there's no one-size-fits-all advice as to whether or not you should stay in the house or leave the house while a divorce is pending. You really need to weigh all of these factors and, speak to your attorney and come up with a strategy for what the best move is for you. So as usual, if you have any questions, you can contact our office. And if you are looking for representation in a divorce or custody case in Connecticut, we would invite you to contact our office as well.